Hey, I'm about to look at this game, Adventure Time Card Wars, Finn vs. Jake. I'm going to show you how it works, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. So this is how a game of Card Wars is going to look when you're setting up. You're going to each have your own deck of cards. You're going to have these 8 tiles in the middle, and these 4 are my tiles, these 4 are my opponent's tiles. And the way these tiles are laid out, they form lanes. So this is a lane, this is a lane, lane, and lane. You always have 4 lanes. This over here, these are damage tokens. And the object of the game is to put 25 damage on your opponent directly. So you put these tokens over here as he gains damage. And each of the tokens are double-sided. One side has 1s and the other side has 3. As soon as one person gets 25 damage on them, the game is over, they've lost, and the person who put the damage on them won. Now, each of these tiles is a landscape, and the landscapes have different types of lands. These are all cornfields, and over here, these are all blue plains. That has to do with what types of cards you can play and what kinds of cards you're going to have in your deck. But I'll explain that later when I talk about deck building. So basically, at the beginning of the game, you're going to draw a hand of 5 cards. And your cards are going to be various types of cards. We're going to have mostly creatures, like this guy. He's a cornfield creature, the traveling farmer. You're going to have buildings. This is a rainbow building, the celestial castle, and you're going to have spells. This is a cornfield spell called Field of Nightmares. Each of these cards has a number in the top left corner. That's how many actions it costs to play that card. On your turn, you get 2 actions that you can use to play cards. So, for example, I could play Patchy the Pumpkin here for 1 action, and I could play my Celestial Castle for my other action. Creatures always get played on the tile in the landscape. Buildings get played behind or below the landscape. And these other cards would stay in my hand. Spells, when you play them, just get discarded, and they do whatever it says on them, and then they get discarded. The object of what you're doing here is you're trying to get creatures out. So I may, rather than play this building, I may play this field stalker and Patchy the Pumpkin. That would be my 2 actions. Since it's the first turn, I can't do anything else besides play these cards out. Now my opponent, on his turn, he's going to have 5 cards. And he is likewise going to play some of his. Let's say he puts this pig here, and this Wodic Marauder there. Okay, and now he's going to be able to attack. So at the end of your turn, any creatures that aren't flooped get to attack. Now, floop, what does that mean? This guy, for example, has this ability. It says floop. When you floop him, you turn him sideways and you pull him back towards the bottom of the landscape. And when you floop him, you get to deal 1 damage to a target creature. And you do this once for each cornfield landscape you control. I control 4 cornfield landscapes, so when I floop him, I could do 1 damage to up to 4 different enemies. Okay, I didn't do that on my first turn because on your first turn you can't floop any of your creatures. But he's played these 2 creatures. He could floop the pig if he wants. The pig has an ability that you floop him to do something. But any creatures that aren't flooped are going to attack. You can decide which order they attack in, but every creature that's ready at the end of your turn has to attack. So he's going to attack with this this Wodic Marauder first, so he turns him sideways but pushes him up towards the top of his landscape. And you'll see that each card has an attack value and a defense value. So he has 3 attack, so he's going to put 3 attack on my Field Stalker there. My Field Stalker has 10 defense, so he's taken 3 damage already, but he could take another 7 before he's defeated. When he's defeated, he will be discarded over here. Now, let's say instead he had placed his Marauder here. When he attacked, since I have nobody in this lane defending, his 3 damage would go straight through to me, and I would get 3 points. Again, if I get 25, then I'm out of the game and my opponent wins. But let's go back to this scenario. He's got his guy here. So he's attacking. He puts 3 points on my Field Stalker. My Field Stalker gets to attack back. That is always the case. When one of your creatures is attacked, they always get to attack back. So he attacks back with 1. So we put 1 on his Marauder. Then his pig attacks. His pig here has an attack value of 1. So that would be 1 on Patchy the Pumpkin. Patchy has 0. So he would attack back, but put no damage on him because his attack is actually 0. Alright, so then it would be my turn. I get to draw another card. So I've got all these guys here. And I'm going to play some other cards. I'm going to maybe put out my Traveling Farmer for 2 actions. And then we see what we can go from there. I'd have this guy attack with his 1 attack to put 1 damage on him. But he has 3 attacks, so he would attack me back for 3. Then I'd have Patchy attack for 0. Now here's where Patchy would probably not attack. Instead I'd have him floop, so that I could put 1 damage on each of his guys. And then my Farmer gets to attack, and he attacks with 2. So I would put 2 damage over here on my opponent. Okay, so I have 4 lanes I can fill up. And like I said, I could play buildings behind the lanes. Like this building here, for example, your creature in this lane has +3 defense. So that would make my Patchy last a lot longer because his defense right now is only 5. So I can do that with that. I could play this Field of Nightmares. It's a spell. Just discard it, and it would deal 1 damage to your opponent for each card in his hand. Now, the game is pretty simple, as you can see. What makes it interesting really is the different card interactions. Like, for example, with this deck that I'm playing with, I've got characters like this Field Stalker and this Traveling Farmer. The Field Stalker, at the beginning of my turn, each player draws a card. So he would let me draw an additional card, but also my opponent would draw a card. So the longer this Field Stalker stays in play, the more cards my opponent is going to get. Now, that seems like that's not good for me, but when I have something like this Field of Nightmares spell card, that makes it so I deal 1 damage to my opponent for each card in his hand. He's got 4 cards over there. I would do 4 damage to him when I play that. And then I have this Traveling Farmer here. His special ability is that when he leaves play, he deals 1 damage to my opponent for each card in his hand. So the more cards my opponent has in his hand, the better that ability is. Now, this guy's going to leave play when he's defeated, when he's got enough damage on him to match his defense. But he can also leave play when I want him to. How that happens is I can play another creature to this lane where he is, and when I do that, I replace him. So I could put out my Corn Dog, for example. Traveling Farmer would leave play, and it would immediately do another 4 damage to my opponent. Replacing creatures that have damage on them is actually an important part of your strategy. Because, like, for example, this Field Stalker, he's already got 6 damage on him. Let's say he had 7. Let's say he had 7. So now he has a defense of 10. This Marauder over here has an attack of 3. So on my turn, if he is ready and going to attack the Marauder, he'd do 1 damage to the Marauder up here, but then the Marauder would do 3 damage back and he would be gone. And so I might not want that to happen, because now it's my turn, and he just got taken out. It's going to be my opponent's turn next, and he can attack with his Marauder, and I won't have anyone here to defend. So, once my Field Stalker has, say, 7 or 8 damage on him, I might choose to replace him with another creature before he gets taken out, just so that I won't be caught on my opponent's turn without a creature in that lane. That's basically how the game works. Again, the objective is to get damage directly on your opponent here. You do that by attacking in a lane where your opponent doesn't have a creature to defend, in which case the damage goes straight through to your opponent. The first person to have 25 points worth of damage on them is taken out of the game, and the other player wins. Alright, so in that video explaining how the game works, I also kind of went into some of the strategies of the game, how various card interactions make the game more interesting. One thing I didn't touch on is deck building, and basically how that works is the game, like this set of cards comes with 2 decks themed for Finn and Jake, and there's other sets of cards that each come with 2 decks, themed off of 2 other characters from the Adventure Time cartoon. And then there's various booster packs that you can get, which just give you some random cards. And you can play with the pre-made decks. That's all I've done and had a good time with that. But you can also build your own decks by combining cards from the various pre-made decks, or by using cards from the booster packs. And again, basically how that works is you're going to choose 4 landscapes for those landscape tiles. With the pre-made decks that I was demonstrating with, you have 4 identical tiles, for each deck, 4 cornfields and 4 blue plains. But you can mix it up. You could have with your deck, you could maybe have like 3 cornfields and 1 blue plains, or the other packs for the game introduce some other types of landscapes. Some nice lands, some useless swamps, and there's one other I can't remember off the top of my head. And so, you can kind of mix that up. What that does for you is that when you're playing a card from your hand, it has that cost in the top left corner. That's how many actions it costs you. But you also have to have that many landscapes of the appropriate type. So, like, to play a cornfield creature with a cost of 2, you need to have at least 2 cornfield landscapes out of your 4. So you can kind of, so far I'm not aware that there's any cards that cost more than 2, so I don't even see how that would be possible with the mechanics of the game. So you could, maybe do like 2 cornfields and 2 blue plains, and then you could put, any cornfield or blue plains cards in your deck. Or you might, maybe do 3 cornfields and 1 blue plains, but then you're limited to only using blue plains creatures and buildings and spells that have a cost of 1 or less. So, yeah, so that's basically how it works. And then you have to have at least a minimum of 40 cards in your deck, but you can have as many as you want. And you can have at most 3 copies of an individual card. So, like, you can only have 3 pigs in your deck. So that's kind of neat. I think, I'm going to basically bought this game because my wife is a big fan of the cartoon. I've seen a few episodes of the cartoon. It's pretty hilarious. I saw actually the episode that inspired this game, in which Finn and Jake play a card game called Card Wars, and that was hilarious. And it was really fun seeing that episode and then playing the game and seeing that the game has, a lot of the cards that are in the card game on the show. And while the mechanics of the game itself don't quite match up with the way that it works on the cartoon, they still manage to have some of the cards work in a similar fashion to the way that they worked on the cartoon. So that was pretty cool. That was a nice little bonus. So I'm going to play it probably some more, and if we continue to enjoy it, I might buy some of those other packs, and so we can play around with some different decks, maybe build our own decks. I'm not sure how much we'll get into that. A lot of it depends on how much she enjoys it, which she said that she did enjoy it. It's not really her type of game per se, but I think she appreciated that it was fairly simple. It was easy to learn. It takes a little bit to see all the synergies between your different cards and to come up with a winning strategy, but understanding the basics of the game is pretty simple. In that respect, I think it's a good game for maybe younger players who are, maybe not able to comprehend a more in-depth card game like Magic the Gathering or Android Netrunner or Star Wars the card game. Those are, more complex, competitive one-on-one types of card games of this style. So I'd say it's probably about on the same level as, say, the Pokemon card game. So this might be a nice alternative to that if you have a younger gamer who wants to play a game like this, but you don't necessarily want to get into Pokemon, doesn't appeal to you, the theme or what have you. This is a pretty cool alternative to that. And I think it's nice that the way they are selling the game, they are selling booster packs, which I'm not a fan of, but you can buy at least 3 of these sets, which come with 2 decks each. So even with that, without buying the randomized booster packs, you can get a pretty nice spread of different types of cards to build different types of decks. So that's pretty cool. Overall, the artwork, if you're a fan of the Adventure Times cartoon, you're going to have no problem with the artwork. If you are not familiar with the cartoon, you might find that the artwork is a little off-putting because it's very simple, very childish-looking drawings, and so that might not appeal to you unless you're a fan of the cartoon. But if you are a fan of the cartoon, or you're just okay with really wacky-looking, kind of childish-looking drawings, then it's okay. The artwork isn't bad. It's just that's the style of it. So, be aware of that. And that's pretty much my thoughts on it. I'm curious, to be able to play it a few more times and to see how my wife responds to it. If she can really get into it, or if it's still not really her kind of game. I might do another post later on some of the deck building options if we continue to play it and get into that. But otherwise, again, it's a fun game. If you're a fan of the cartoon, you'll like how it's themed, with the cartoon. And if you have younger gamers, definitely a good game for them. That's my thoughts on Adventure Time Card Wars.